welcome to What the Hex, your source for Warhammer Underworlds in under 30 ways to sidestep the meta altogether. I'm your co-host, Davy, and with me, as always, my co-host, Phil. How are you doing, Phil?
Hey, doing pretty good.
Good to hear. We are coming at you on the 31st of July, and that's our context to say that, where's that Hexbane, yo?
Yeah, right? In weeks. I haven't heard anything.
I know. We know about their eventual arrival, but still waiting for the pre-order announcement. Hopefully more about that soon. So
Yeah, seriously.
Today we're going to talk about some ideas. There was one we were kicking around, and one that was a listener had requested that we kind of discuss a little bit of the we'd mentioned in passing, like some of these decks we'd seen that looked like they were not even necessarily counter meta, but something outside the meta. So we're going to talk about some of that and some examples where we think it's at, and we'll get there. So before we get to that, though, we got some community shout outs. Phil, you got anything?
Yeah, so it actually goes well with this as a topic. So Jacko from the Tabletop Sydney channel, his blog, the Glory Seekers blog, he posted a rundown of his claw pack deck and the sort of like super hyper aggro version that he was playing with, that really gunning to try and take out the enemy leader sort of at all costs.
Mm-hmm.
And it's leveraging a lot of really interesting stuff. It's definitely like throwing caution to the wind to try and get that leader kill. So I thought it was a cool different idea, different way to play, and definitely is one that fits with this sort of sidestepping the meta kind of thing, because all out aggro is not something we've seen a ton of in the recent past.
Yeah. I got to read it too. I like anything that's trying something different. Sometimes those crazy experiments pay off. So
yeah.
We got a final reminder for the next Hex that's coming up on August 7th. It'll be a Sunday. Come up and play with us in Madison. We'll be playing championship format. We'll have a link in the show notes, or you can just go to themortalrealms.com and navigate to our events, and we'll get you signed up. Just $5 to play. Should be a good time. I think one other community shout out is the Path to Glory podcast just had Nick Ramone on. We had him just a couple episodes ago talking ghouls. And they also talk some meta, and so that's another angle to look at this, and so that's kind of a good contextual. Those are some fellows who play an awful lot, so getting Absolutely. A sense of how they rate it and such is worthwhile. But that's what's going on with them. Phil, what the hex is going on with you?
I have unfortunately been traveling a little bit for work, so I have not gotten to do any sort of hobbying or playing of any games for a while now. But we're going to be kicking off our next league for our local group this coming week. So definitely looking forward to that, getting ready. Should be a good time.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's a lot of people hungry. You got even some new players that are taking a look at it. So
yeah,
looking forward to that. Myself, I made it out for a Thursday here. I got to rumble. Actually, I took a deck that you had built since you weren't going to be there. I wanted to try it out, so I was a little more educated about it when we got to talking about it a little later today. That's the kind of research you can expect from this podcast, listeners.
Yes,
that's what we're there for. Actually, it was just my excuse to play a warband I really like. But besides that, I'm also been teaching my daughter. Her friend knows how to play. He's come with to a couple of league nights now. And she is interested in playing, but she's somebody who really wants to have a good grasp of something before she kind of gets out in front of strangers and such, even as welcoming as our crew is. And it might be a topic at some point down the line. It's pretty niche, but there might be something there about kind of how to teach somebody who is just totally new. Like she plays more board games than I think somebody her age uh, often does, but she doesn't have any miniature background or anything like that, obviously. So um, really trying to start it from scratch so it's not so frustrating. I've kind of taken some tips from actually I remember some stuff that Max Bernstein talked about a while ago, and it's been working out and it's been fun. So
Yeah, nice.
uh, more on that another time, maybe.
Yeah,
But for now, our main topic against the meta, we're talking about how to sort of sidestep it, or what options there are for a little bit of lateral thinking. I think is how it came up, and this one really comes from, well, like we said, a listener request, but also from Phil, some stuff you were playing around with, um, and
yeah,
yeah, so that was kind of. I think we talked a little on the last episode, right? You
yeah.
you had the spark when you got a little fed up a bit.
I think I played into Brian's uh, the
Dread pageant.
Dread Pageant. Yeah,
Yeah,
played into Dread Pageant. I think one too many times, and got a little sick of the like, all right, who's gonna have the right power card now?
yeah,
Situation where it was like we both know that whoever comes with the final power card in this action phase is gonna be able to score a bunch of glory, and whoever ends up being pushed off or whatever
yeah.
is going to be left out in the cold.
Hmm.
And it was like, you know what? I should just like find some way to not have to do this.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think we can both say, like, just be clear that we don't think that's like a bad way to play or anything.
no,
Like, we've had some tremendous games that were exactly like that. Like back in the Mollog, you were doing Mollog control and I was doing Steel Hearts control. and
yes.
and I
Ooh.
think of the what how many activations is there? There's 12, 24 activations in the game. I think maybe 14 of them were drawing power cards or
Yeah,
something
yeah, of
ridiculous. So,
course.
uh, but those were tense. Those were awesome games. But sometimes you just need to change it up. Uh,
Yeah.
but if we were going to talk about sidestepping the meta, we'd have to sort of define it. And disclaimer: this is just our take on it. Like I said, there's plenty other places you can look for another definition. But Phil, how do you see it right now?
So I think the the way the objective pool has played out has sort of pushed the meta, at least as far as I can tell. We're really in a like flip and uh, stand in cover kind of meta.
What makes it the flip?
So I think it's basically the two. I'd say probably the two main surges right now that pretty much everyone can run and are very powerful. Um, so we've got the sudden revelation,
Mm-hmm.
which is just super easy glory. So like I guess I think everybody knows at this point, but you just flip two feature tokens in a power step for one glory. That's quite simple. And then the other one is Ever Downwards, where you delve three times.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you can have your leader delve in enemy territory just the one time, and that's sometimes almost impossible to stop. And so I think those two like sort of starts people down a path of
Mm-hmm.
like, well, I know I'm gonna care about these two because they're so
Mm-hmm.
simple. So we're flipping anyway. So then maybe I'll even include shadow elimination. So now I have three for flipping. And then,
Yeah,
and then it's like, well, now I'm going to be standing on cover anyway. So maybe I'll include like horrors in the dark. And, it kind of just snowballs into this thing of like,
sure.
there's this sort of set, right, of
Yeah.
surges that are very simple. Um,
And
no dice rolling.
yeah, I'd say alternatively to it leading you into something is maybe that was already something you wanted to do and just didn't have the help for it until recently,
True.
and now you do. So I think you have two different decks that are kind of frolicking in this meta, and I'd say it's standing on cover or it's standing on objectives. I think there's some
Sure.
builds that
Yep.
are getting a lot of mileage out of standing on objectives, and you can break it down further. Whether you're somebody like Dread Pageant who's going to stand on them in your territory, or somebody
Yeah.
who's going to stand
Yep.
on them in enemy territory, like Nick Schools
Yep.
make good headway with. Um, so yeah, you have these decks that are like, I already was trying to do that, and now I can really do it, and so now they're relevant in the meta. And other decks that are like, yeah, those are pretty good. Actually, I can find a build that involves holding things. That's how in the past we've seen things like Thunderix Profiteers. Not on
Hmm.
release. Clearly, they were not obviously a hold warband, but I think once people played with them some and found that there was uh, some options that would help them with that, like
Yep.
hidden purpose at the time and that sort of thing. So I think there's other warbands that are discovering like, well, actually, I'm good to I can mess with some feature tokens. That sounds good. I can do something with that. So
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And with some of the stuff for scoring in cover, there's
mm,
so much cover right now that like
hmm
it becomes almost trivial to have a couple
hmm
fighters in cover. And
and
because it gives the defense boost as well, it's like
right,
almost don't.
and and synergizes with quite a few cards that are out there, right?
Yeah, yeah, they're really pushing it right now to be like if you're in cover, you get this bonus or whatever. So,
Yeah, yeah.
um yeah, it's definitely helping a lot of uh sort of those middle of the road strategies as well. So like control play is really strong right now. There's lots of powerful power cards that can do lots of nice little tricks.
Yeah.
Um, so things like Shadeborn and Soul Raid are definitely seeing. I mean, I think Soul Raid was already seeing a lot of play, and I think
hmm
they are continuing to see a lot of play.
hmm
Um, but yeah, at least that's what I have sort of been seeing. I know there's some other things.
Yeah. Let me revisit the power cards thing. Like you mentioned power cards. You felt like the power cards are king right now, and some of these will come down to who's got the right power cards. And again, for more discussion on that, the I'm going to continue to call it sleeve it or heave it. The
Yeah,
sleeve it or
yeah,
heave it segment.
yeah,
They
for
did
sure.
an adapted one where they talk about dark inversion.
Yes.
And this is the one where you can swap two feature tokens that are empty. And so there's a big thing going on right now. Like if both sides are trying to hold more objectives, then the side that can get that out before the feature tokens are no longer empty is has a
Pretty.
edge.
Yeah.
And so is
Yep.
that good or bad for the game? And I think I won't preempt their discussion. My only take is that I think particularly for players who've been playing a long time or who are pretty good at I think it's important to sort of separate your emotional response to a bad luck moment. Like
Yes.
uh, I don't even want to call it a negative player experience, but like you can be disappointed, but there's ways to play through things. And
Yeah.
I think sometimes people can get like too much attached to the bad feeling they had right in that moment and think a card is
Yeah.
busted as a result. So
Yeah. Just because you got dunked on doesn't necessarily mean that it's
yeah,
bad for the game.
yeah. Unless I got dunked on, and then it is bad for the game.
Of
So
course.
yep. But yeah, and so we talk about the different war bands that have kind of seen a step up. Dread Pageant are happy to have more stuff to be, more things to incentivize them for standing on things. And whereas the other ones like Gitz or Sepulchral Guard, who had some things that had some natural inclinations to hold, and now that there's ways to get things, and there's nuances in all this. Like Gitz, the more easy surges, the better they are because the faster they can inspire,
Yep.
and the
Very,
faster they can
very.
inspire, the less they bleed, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Um, and then, like you said, Soul Raid's always there. And I kind of had Soul Raid as an outlier, but here's the thing with like a meta, so like there are Soul Raid builds that care about, that use like horrors in the dark or whatever that we're going to be on certain feature tokens. They
Hmm.
may not be as all out hold as some other things. Um, but your meta is not just styles, but the warbands you tend to see a lot. And so anyone who is looking to compete at a higher level should have a plan against Soul Raid. Um,
Absolutely.
so when we talk about sidestepping, what we're talking about is either a strategy that people aren't expecting, uh, or a war band altogether that people are not practiced against, which may also include a strategy that people aren't expecting, and they have to kind
Yeah.
of. It slows them down. It gives them more decisions that they don't have any muscle memory for.
Yep.
Um, if you have played against, I don't know, Shadeborn often enough, you might be okay. Well, if I can get the leader down early enough, I'm in a good position. That sort of
Yep.
thing. So
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
that's the angle we're taking.
Yeah. And this is some stuff we've talked about before in some of the like dark horse. If for folks who've been listening before, sometimes we talk about like tournament strategies and like going as a dark horse, um, just doing things that people aren't expecting. You can just catch people off guard. Um, this is kind of in that same vein as well, in that
Mm,
like a strategy can just catch people off guard. But that, I guess, to just to make sure we have the distinction, that is like playing something that's off the wall with the intent of using the surprise factor to try and get a leg up
mm,
in that one instance. Whereas this is probably more of like a consistent strategy
hmm.
that is just not something that everybody's doing.
Right. Yes. You went through and kind of brainstormed or went through some of the things that we've considered as possible other options. What
Yeah.
what were some of the things you thought of? Having defined the meta as feature tokens are important, um, and power cards are king, and it's a battle over who can hold those with all the nuances that come with that. Where did you? What are some of the things you got?
Yeah, so I guess the reason that I did this is I was thinking like, okay, what else could I do?
Mm,
And so the first thing I was thinking about is how can I just find a strategy where I don't care as much about doing what everyone else is doing because there's
hmm.
just naturally more competition. So
Hmm.
I initially actually wanted to just look and see what there is right now for magic. Trying to do like a spellslinger build again. uh, I think the card pool isn't quite built out enough to go all the way Spellslinger again, like we used to be
Mm,
able to do back
hmm.
in Night Vault. But I think it's getting closer, and I
Hmm.
wouldn't be shocked if we add a few more objectives, if suddenly it can be there.
Sure.
Um,
There's a few pretty fuego spells out there.
yeah,
Like I think some of my favorites are the Quintox bubble is real powerful.
yep,
And then
yep.
Hypnotic Aspect is another distraction esque card. And those are few and far between these days. So,
Yeah, yeah, you can get some really interesting stuff going right now.
mm,
I think the thing that's holding it back, at least from what I could tell, is that you just don't have enough ways to score with it.
right.
So
You can
you're
build a
like,
good power deck, you're saying, but like
I
your
think,
objective
I
deck
think, yeah,
struggles.
I think the
Yeah.
power deck is pretty solid, but I think
Hmm.
that the objectives you're like really low glory ceiling, and then it's
Mm,
just kind of like, well, what if the dice don't go my way?
hmm.
Now what am I looking at doing?
Sure. And that's a fair point. Like Glory Ceiling, I think I undervalued that when I went in. We talked a little bit about it when I was talking about going into the Vassal Brawl.
Yeah.
Um, I think we tend to play with some lower glory ceilings here, so I've been able to get away with it a little bit. Going in there, like if you didn't have great gains in a way to score it, you were probably playing a little bit from behind, and
Mm-hmm.
so part of the meta is not just controlling these feature tokens and we're standing on them, but keeping pace, right? So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know what everyone's average is right now, but I feel like it's high teens at least. And if you're playing Gits, you have a real strong chance of breaking over 20 glory in a game
mm, hmm,
because they have their infestation for 5.
hmm,
Um, so it is something you have to consider. I mean, just because like, hey, this could be a strong strategy, like you still might just get outscored. So
right, right.
something to consider. But so that's an area to watch. Something I noticed when I was looking at those as well is that the Grand Alliance cards I think are going to make a big difference in who ends up being like the viable Magic users.
Sure.
Um, Chaos I think right now has some decent cards for Magic, but
Mm,
unfortunately you don't have very many good Chaos casting warbands. So
yeah, yeah.
that's another weird like just spot where it's like, man, we just had these shifted a little bit. There's something else there.
Yeah, there's always the Thedra magic build when you need
Oh
it. So,
yeah, the classic.
or but I mean, even along those lines, like you make a good point. You know, it needs to be that complete package, right? Because
Yep.
there, you could have a great card, you know, like Zarshia. Bittersoul has some. Well, used to be two amazing Gambit spells. Now one of them is not so great since things start looking at cover, but
Hmm.
Whispers of Chaos or something like that. That, you know, pushes somebody and then either damages them or gives them a move token. It's like, what?
Yeah,
It's
yeah, yeah.
it's bananas good. Uh, but the problem is that you are running it and she's like the weak point in that warband, you know, so she's
Right.
the part that caves and you're one deep. So that's always the issue in there. But yeah, it
Yeah,
could be you need the power cards, you need the objective cards, and you need the fighters to support it, and that's a
yeah,
tough thing
yeah.
to find. So
Always tough. Since there's so few warbands with more than one caster, you really need somebody who's gonna last if you're gonna play
yeah,
Magic.
I
So
mean we save so few. Is it two? Is it vampires and curse breakers?
yes,
Yeah.
it is in fact actually just two. Um,
Yeah.
but I mean, it's not to say that some of the warbands with a single caster can't do well.
Mm.
Like you know, Vortimus has pulled his weight in the past,
Mm-hmm.
but it tended to be that if you were gonna do that, you could do it better. Like the card pool just worked better for the other warbands anyway.
Yeah.
Um, so we'll have to sort of just watch that space, I think. But
Sure.
it was something to consider. Felt like maybe there was enough, but I think maybe not quite. If somebody
Mm.
else disagrees, I would love to see a Magic build. I was trying to look at like what other types of control builds are available. Is there something with like just movement and positioning,
Mm.
not on tokens, but like some of the old ways that we could do movement and positioning stuff? And really, they've pretty much just pruned that out of the game. It exists a little bit.
Yeah. I My take on this is that there might be something there. I think I believe it's Craig. He's on the Discord. He talks about a Ripa's illusion build that he
Hmm.
played around with. Seems to have had some success with. I think it cares about features a little bit, but not a
Yeah,
ton.
yeah,
But what it's
not
really,
as much.
yeah, you're leaning to the illusions, scoring off the illusions, and uh, you know, like as soon as you do that, as soon as you're heavy illusion, all of a sudden silver lining becomes a much more reliable score.
Mm, yeah.
Um,
Yep.
and so it's one that has this way of scoring that maybe doesn't need the features so bad. But here's the thing, like if we reach way back into like season 2 when we talk about this, when we tried to say that there were three, you know, main types, there was control, there was hold objective, and there was aggro, and we would say aggro beats hold objective beats control, and control beats aggro. uh, right now the meta feels sort of hold objective, right? Because
Yeah, it
it's these
certainly is.
big end phase scores, and so even if you find a way to kind of stand off, unless you can really somehow disrupt how somebody else is scoring, uh, some of those people standing around on feature tokens are just going to outrace you, um, and
Yeah,
they don't care that you're hanging back or whatever.
for sure. And so, I mean, and I forgot that you had mentioned that before, but yeah. So this Ripa's build maybe has enough aggro pieces to sort of help tie
Mm-hmm.
that all together and be
Mm-hmm.
like disruptive just by being Ripas. They're just going to
Mm-hmm.
be in people's faces.
Just keep rolling
Um,
crits on those bites, and you
yeah,
got it,
of
bud.
course,
Yeah,
perfect.
it's that easy.
Um, and then to kind of go along with this, like I started looking at like, okay, so we've got these map fragment things now, and
Mm.
there's that new key, and it's like, could we do something like old, like way back in the day where you had Mollog just sit around and score a bunch of glory just for existing? And it's like, we're probably not there yet either. But that was, I
Right.
think, again, a very like control build.
Mm.
Um, so I don't know if they're gonna put enough pieces back in the game to do something like that. But I think that could also work. But like you said, it doesn't play well if your opponent is going to be able to outrace you, right? Because if you're
Mm,
both just sitting there racking up glory, you need to have a high ceiling to be able to make that work.
right, right.
Uh, so ultimately, then that I was like, okay, well, what if we just said aggro? We're just gonna just go stomp face and just not care about anything else, like the really
Yeah,
old school, just like, hey, Shadespire days, let's just go punch each other.
yeah.
Um, and at first, I was just looking at like Hrothgorn and like some of the big punchy warbands, and it
Hmm.
just didn't feel like there was enough like guaranteed glory in aggro. I was like, man, there's just so much stuff that relies on dice, and this feels
Mm,
really bad,
hmm.
especially against a warband. Like in those matchups where most of your opponents are going to be scoring a lot in the end phase, you could just get outraced if you just can't hit your attacks, and that's
Yeah,
always
and
sort of the risk, right?
right. I saw some. What else did I see? I saw Diablerist kind of, and I don't know how far down. He probably got distracted by Gits again, but I remember hopping on at one point on Vassal and noticing, oh, he's playing Cunning Crew. Like I've been messing with them. Like what's going on here? And I think he was maybe thinking some same thoughts as you are here. Were like, what if I do aggro and then load in some stuff that doesn't, that makes dice very reliable or doesn't even need them. So in that example, Cunning Crew, this was a Cunning Crew that didn't really care about feature tokens,
Hmm.
didn't want to stand on them, didn't want to give up, some of those pings or anything. But they have those like, hey, did you make an attack with two supports? Cool, you scored a surge,
Yeah, like
something to do. So it doesn't matter what the dice showed, you just got it.
yeah,
Um, and Cunning Crew does have a lot of crazy positioning tricks. So
yeah.
especially if you're Chad and you're really good at it. And so stuff like what impending doom, where two
Yep.
people are next to somebody. So I was like, oh, okay, I get it. Uh, I don't know how much success he found with it, but that was that idea of like, how can I do aggro that sidesteps some of the ways that we're seeing play, but also get reliable glory. You didn't look at Cunning Crew though. What did you look at?
I did not. I dug as deep as you can. I went all the way back to the bottom of
Delved
the
so
well,
deep, yeah.
and dug out the old Reavers.
Bottom of the blood-filled well. There they are.
Yeah, there
Yeah.
they are. They never. I can never leave them alone long. Uh, Got to
Wish
try
I know
them.
how to quit them.
I
No, I
know,
don't.
right?
I'm happy to not.
They're just too much fun, though, right? You gotta
Yeah,
just
yeah.
you dig them out every once in a while. But so that's what I ultimately landed on. And now that you mention it, Cunning Crew would probably also be one that you could really make work here, but for very different reasons. Um, but yeah, so the main thing that I noticed with Reavers is that you have ridiculously reliable end phase glory,
Mm,
because you can score glory for being dead, which basically nobody else can do.
mm,
It's sort of their unique trick.
yeah.
And with the current pool, because Pure Carnage is part of the Essentials kit, which
Hmm.
is the only reason this works, you can end up with, just from Pure Carnage and your in-faction stuff, you can score 6 end phase glory for having your own warband and a couple other enemy fighters be dead.
Yeah.
And
Uh,
that's pretty solid.
sure. And I mean, this is a good callback to Jacko's because this is the
Yeah.
this is the thing he's leaning into.
Same idea. Yeah. He's got Pure
Yeah.
Carnage, and then they have
Collateral damage, I believe.
yeah, which
Yeah.
you need to get the enemy leader dead to be able to score that.
And
But
have
it's the
four
same
people dead.
idea. You
Yeah.
have 4 total fighters dead and killed the enemy leader,
Yeah.
which is like Corn Cares Not, but a little harder.
Yeah, similar to I think Grashrax despoilers have basically a corn cares not that needs at least one of them to be alive.
Yeah, right.
I was like, it's fair if you haven't done that. It's pretty
Yeah.
you're in a lot of trouble anyway. That said, though, like it's not nothing. Like it's I think as we've found with this, like sometimes you are just all dead and
Yep.
It's nice to say like, doesn't matter. I'm going to score. I have these 6 glory that will score.
Yep.
Um,
There have been many games where I've known that I have it just because I could make sure my own fighters were dead, which feels weird. Is maybe not maybe the reason why they've never allowed something like this to exist again in the game, because they're like, that's not how this game should be played. And it's like,
yeah,
that's what the cards do.
yeah,
Um, so that was sort of the foundation. And I was like, okay, so we have a base of end phase glory, which
hmm
helps. So we're setting that total glory that we talked about, where it's like we need to have a high glory ceiling. What else can we do? um,
yeah. And this is our kind of take on how. I mean, ours, yours, your take on how we take one of these ideas of like, here's a potential way to sidestep the meta, and here's how you run down that rabbit hole, right? Like,
yep.
so you figured out, okay, I've got a nice base of glory. What was the next thing you started looking for?
So then I just kind of wanted to make sure. I was like, okay, let's just double check again. What are the fighters all doing again?
Mm,
So they're all fast. That's helpful. Their base speed 4, inspire to speed 5. Their inspire condition is super simple.
mm,
Have 3 fighters be out of action. Doesn't
mm-hmm.
matter which 3.
Yeah.
It can be yours, can be your opponent's. You just make that happen and they inspire. You have a base 3 damage fighter, which is super important
Mm-hmm.
because you want to be able to get fighters dead quickly. And then you just have solid other fighters.
Mm-hmm.
So gives you kind of a nice mix there. Um, so I was like, okay, so I've got enough, just base stats to work with to be aggro, because like we do need to actually kill people if we're going to play aggro.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so then it was looking at like, okay, how else can we fill out the end phase to make sure that we have enough glory? The surges will be fine. We can make surges work. Um, there's plenty of really good surges right now. The strong additions to the ones that I already mentioned are unafraid,
Mm-hmm.
because you just have to be near opponents, and it doesn't matter how many. You have to have all your surviving fighters. So sometimes you'll have like one fighter who's kind of out of position for this, but it's not usually too bad. If you get it in turn 1, sometimes you just need to mulligan this away. But
Yeah.
um, that's probably the only downside there. And then Lost Leader,
Yeah.
sort of the other one. I was like, oh, another thing you can score for just having a fighter be dead.
Yeah. Uh,
Uh,
I this one I think might be a little more controversial.
I think
Can you run
it's
it down for me real quick, and then I got a thought or two on it.
yes. So this is definitely a controversial pick. This was probably the last end phase that I put in the deck. I did not want to run it,
Mm-hmm.
and because I was like, this is going to be too hard. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not going to be able to pick this up. Yes, it's worth 2 glory. Yes, I only have to have Garrek dead, but like that's risky.
Right.
So the card is a duel where you score it in an end phase if your leader is out of action and you have more glory points than each opponent.
Mm.
Score for 2 glory.
So I think one thing that helps with this, because this is the second caveat, is the hard part, right? Like
Yes.
getting Garrick dead is whatever. He's
Yeah,
4
you can make
wounds, but
sure
he's
he's
only
dead.
on 1 dodge. Like he's gonna die.
You can make
Uh,
sure he's dead. Yeah.
yeah, but having more glory is potentially the tricky thing. But what I found worked with it is because you were aggro, you were kind of blitzing in, and you were getting maybe an early jump,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of warbands that want to hold things, like having that last activation to kind of get on things,
Yep.
and you're kind of taking that first one, and so because you're scoring your end phases first, you have that extra chance to kind of get ahead a little bit.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it worked. It worked definitely better than I expected.
Same. It has worked very well for me so far. I've been happy that it's in the deck. Um, I think the only times I haven't scored it, I didn't need it.
Hmm.
It was games where it was like, oh, this is such a blowout because I just had hot dice, or it
Hmm.
was like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, and there's a card later in the power deck that is kind of relevant with this as well. We'll mention it when we get there. But
Yep.
is that did we cover all the end phase here? Or did you have another one?
That is all the end phase. We've got It Begins, Corn Cares Not. Uh, oh, nope, there is one more. I'm just running them down here. Promise of Destruction is the other one.
Mm.
So there's a score in an end phase if there are one or more persisting gambits. And this
Mm,
is one that I threw together sort of like the core, and then I was like, I don't actually know what the right choices are going to be for the rest of the deck until I figured out some other power cards.
hmm
So this is one of those things where I circled back with a few options and then was like, okay, there's enough persisting gambits that promise should be easy.
hmm
So then I threw in promise, and then we have unafraid, pure carnage, and lost leader.
Yeah. You said that the surges were easy. Did you find that to be the case as you're putting them together?
Yes, except for one.
Yeah.
And I have a thought in mind for what to switch out for it, but right now, the first few choices are pretty easy. So blood for the blood god, which is the in faction, just super simple. Make 3 charges in a round. Um, and this has the weird caveat of being one of the old surges where you can score it after you drew into it if you've
Mm.
already met the condition, which is probably bad that it still works that way. They should probably just errata it, but it's fine.
Yeah.
Uh, everything to prove,
hmm
which gives you primacy as well, which is
Yeah.
actually kind of big. Um,
As in, it introduces primacy into
into
play
the
here.
deck.
Yeah.
Yes, is the only primacy
Uh-huh.
card currently in the deck, which then gives you a potential 3 additional glory to score.
Yeah.
You,
I would
I would
probably
say it's
judge it as a net one because they.
net probably
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
Um, but if you can make sure that you take it back,
Sure.
sometimes it's just like giving yourself extra end phase glory.
And everything to prove is a little bit on theme here, where you will often score
Yep.
one from losing somebody. So.
Yeah, there'll even be times where I will purposefully put somebody out, sort of lamb to slaughter situation, to be like, look at look at this Arnulf, look at this Targor. Don't you want to
Yeah.
hit this Targor? Because
He's.
yeah, they're so easy to take out. But seed glory can be pretty important at the beginning of the game.
Mhm,
So throwing them away is perfectly viable. Then branching fate.
mhm.
You have plenty of ways to add dice, plenty of ways to get rerolls. So branching fate ends up being fairly reliable. You don't know exactly when it's going to come up, but it comes up pretty frequently.
Sure.
And then contest of equals, similar idea. It's just kind of going to happen. And then reckless swing, which you can guarantee will come up in a lot of matchups.
Mhm.
3 fighter warbands, it's tough,
Mm,
but you don't see a ton of those right now. So I figured it was worth the gamble. And
yeah.
if you have one surge that's sort of out of reach, that's not the end of the world.
Sure. Sure. Did you
And
talk
then
about let the blood flow?
yeah, so then the last one is let the blood flow, which is not reliable at all, but is
No.
greedy and felt like an interesting thing to try. I will say it has been quite difficult. For folks who don't know, let the blood flow is a Reavers specific surge. You will score it immediately if 3 or more of your fighters have made successful attack actions in a phase. It's a big ask, but you do get 2 glory out of it, and it is also one that you can score after drawing the
Mm.
card. So sort of double dipping in that sense.
Yeah. What I found is that the challenge is that in the first round, it's tough to find an accuracy boost from upgrades because you got to get the
Yep.
seed glory. In the second round, uh, you might start the round with 3 or maybe 4 fighters, but you're really kind of sweating watching, who's
hmm
attacked, who's hit. So it's tough. And then with blood for the blood god being in there with did you make 3 charges? That one can also be in trouble as you proceed later into the game. So the two of
It can
those,
be.
yeah, that one's obviously easier because there's no dice involved. But
Yep.
did you have something else you considered for this?
Yes, and I think that it's pretty at this point. I think I would just make the change, and it's what's it called? It's the one for either charging 6 hexes or making a
Mm,
kill at range 3+. You won't be
Winged
doing
Death. Yeah.
yes, winged
Yeah.
death. And you just have enough speed boosts here that you can just make that happen.
Mm.
Um, and you could even add a third one if you wanted to.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I totally overlooked that. I tried finding another two glory surge that I would consider.
Yeah, and just drop it down
Interestingly,
by one.
yeah, and that's a good option. I played around with the idea of false apotheosis, which is
Yeah.
two glory if you take a fighter out that has three upgrades, but that has the flip problem where it is you are not going to score it in the first round because nobody's going to have three upgrades in the
Yeah.
first round. And then sometimes whichever person has three upgrades is the one you're ignoring. You're like, okay, let that person do whatever they want. I'm going to kill everybody else.
Hmm.
So uh, I didn't. I tried to play your deck exactly as you'd sent it to me. So I didn't actually sub that one in, but it was something
Hmm.
that I thought be worth just trying out and seeing. With
Yeah.
mulligans and such, could you get it to a point where it'd be helpful?
I
So,
think I think there's actually a handful of kill surges you could use.
mm,
I just was trying to stay away from kill surges just because sometimes you're not going to get the kills when you need to.
sure,
It's that weird timing thing of like, I need to get a
yeah,
kill while I'm holding this card in my hand. And if I
hmm
can't, then I'm, stuck.
hmm
So um, I'm not opposed to putting in kill surges. I would definitely try them. I thought about them, but I was like, I think just the charge stuff would be more consistent.
hmm
Um,
yeah. If you did really want to kill Surge, I think in Cold Blood might be it. This is
yep.
take somebody out who is unwounded. You can end up with some pretty high damage
Yes.
strikes in there. And also, Arnulf happens to be an assassin,
He is.
so he can just sometimes all those Arnulf kills are just going to rake them in for you.
They
So,
sure will. um, but yeah, so that is the objective deck,
mm,
and so if you sub out Let the Blood Flow, it ends up being 17 glory.
hmm
If you leave it as is, it's 18, but
yeah,
I think Let the Blood Flow is probably too greedy.
yeah.
Um, you're not going to score that consistently enough. So
Well, yeah. What I did like about this was that your glory total was higher than I expected for this. And when you consider that you're hopefully scoring them from kills as well, it's like, oh, all right,
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and like I said, the end phase glory is fairly automatic.
hmm
There's a few things where it's not like I said, unafraid. You can kind of end up in some difficult situations there. Um, but like corn care is not pure carnage. Like those better be pretty much automatic here because that's the whole idea of the deck. If you can't
Yeah.
make that happen, then something's gone horribly wrong.
Yeah.
Or I guess maybe very well. Like I guess if you just wipe your opponent off the board in turn one or something, like theoretically that's possible, but usually then
Yeah.
you're also ahead anyway.
Yeah. Well, then, how did you make this plan happen? What does the power deck look like?
Yeah, so started out with like making sure we have the good stuff from the Reavers.
hmm
So they're I think they basically have three, and technically there's a fourth that I don't include. It's just one. There's like they have a draw card.
mm
You get a kill, you can draw two power cards, which is pretty
mm.
great. Um, but I think Dark Sacrifice is more reliable right now.
This is
But
one of yours that I get to.
yep,
Yeah.
yeah. But so I included Blood Offering, which is you deal one damage to one of your fighters so that they can get plus two dice in the next attack action.
hmm
Um, so one, you just need accuracy boosts. Plus two dice is really good.
hmm
And then this has the side effect of, well, one, you can kill your own fighters with it if you really have to.
Right.
You'll
Right.
see there's actually a couple of different things in here that let you do that.
Yeah.
And then uh, it also means that the fighter that you use this on can't give away primacy.
Yes. Yeah.
Um,
I tried my cunning crew against you, and I found exactly this problem where I was like, we were pretty tight, and I was like, I should really try and steal primacy back. And I'm looking at the board, I'm like, I actually don't have that many options. He's got a lot of wounded dudes out there.
yeah.
Like, so it made my decisions more difficult.
Yeah. And in a lot of the cases with like 1 and 3 wound fighters, or
Mm,
well, 2 and 3 wound fighters, uh, having them suffer one damage basically is like there's no difference. If they get
mm,
hit, they're probably dead anyway.
mm,
Um, and so it's like, well, I'd rather that I be more accurate and not give up primacy than try and keep an extra wound.
mhm.
Um, and then you have Fueled by Slaughter. So this card is ridiculous.
Yeah, this is the card that hasn't always been like an auto include, but it this is the reaction after any fighter is killed, so friendly or enemy, and it can be from an attack action or a ploy that takes a fighter out of action. Then a friendly fighter can make an attack action.
Yeah.
Uh, and this is one of those cards that kind of bends the board state. It had an unexpected synergy when I tried it out with Reckless Swing because
Yeah.
I charge into a position to score Reckless Swing. And you're like, yeah, it kind of sucks. I'm giving a support. I didn't have a scything attack to throw out. But all of a sudden, even if you make that kill, now you're still standing next to someone, and they have to think like, okay, like, do I swing on this idiot who charged and is not going to swing again? But actually, maybe he will because I haven't seen Fueled by Slaughter. Um,
Yeah.
this is one of those cards that is hurts my brain to play against. And if you can get some other cards to complement it, which you have, like there's the rogue play of like, well, Arnulf is staggering on 1 health. Maybe I'll just blood offering him
So I,
and use that to trigger
yeah.
Fueled by Slaughter to have Sayek chop somebody in half.
Yeah. It's there's some really interesting plays here. The other crazy thing is that it doesn't have a range restriction on this.
Mm,
So if you have attacks with reach, you can do some weird stuff where you're like
yeah,
not even standing adjacent and suddenly you're throwing axes at people.
yeah, yep.
They would. I don't think they would print this card right now into the game. It's probably not something that you would ever see again. But I think the Reavers kind of need it, so I think it's okay for them.
Sure.
And like you said, it's powerful. So it was like, yep, this has to go in. Extra attacks out of sequence are going to be really powerful. And while I don't care so much about how many wounds my fighters have, sometimes making sure that you aren't going to lose a fighter in a round or in the next activation is really important.
Mm,
And so Insensate is one card that I've always run with Reavers
mm,
because you can make very reckless charges and then guarantee that your fighter doesn't die right away.
right. Yeah. It's one of those cards. So we were talking about this the last local play night, where I think in this deck, this card doesn't explicitly help your win condition, and so you have to look at it really hard. It is
Yeah.
a great card, inarguably a great card,
Yep.
uh, but a card being great is not reason enough. Like if I put every card that was great that I could into a deck, I'd have a 50 power card deck,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And so this is a card I've looked at a few times as we've kind of passed this deck back and forth to say like, okay, is this? I know it's really good. Is it helping me do this? And I think it might be just good enough that it does. But yeah,
So
um, go
yeah.
ahead.
So the main reasoning for having it is it sets up future things for like Fueled by Slaughter,
Hmm.
or it can, if I'm expecting a charge into a Sake who hasn't gotten to go yet,
Hmm.
it can be a way to make sure that I get to make a big swing
Yeah,
later in the round.
yeah,
Uh, I don't really use it to save, like just to be like, I don't want to lose any fighters because I definitely want to lose fighters. It's just a timing thing. So I'll
yeah,
only use it very sparingly.
yeah.
Um, and usually either after I've done something stupid, like charged into the midst of 3 or 4 fighters, or when I'm trying to set up a future attack.
Mm, right.
Um,
Um, Making those charges. How are you getting up there?
yeah. So we got a couple different ways. The first one that I included was Reckless Rush,
Hmm.
uh, which this was some who called out in the Discord that this was like a sneaky. This was from the episode that we did for like underrated cards.
Yep.
I don't remember. I'm sorry, I don't remember who called it out, but I was like, that is definitely interesting. And so then I was looking at this for these fighters, and I was like, they're base speed 4, so you play this, they're speed 8,
That is nuts.
and if they're inspired, they're speed 10. And I was like, you can get anywhere on the board with this, and it deals a damage to your fighter. So again, you can like set up the fighter to go charge off onto somebody and not give up the primacy if they're in there.
Hmm.
And like if you need to go kill a specific fighter, like a leader or something, you can just use this to be like, nowhere is safe.
Yeah.
Um, so that was the first one that I included because it seemed really powerful. And
Mm-hmm.
then I included Outrun Death. One, because it's +2 move, but then
Mm-hmm.
also because it's a persisting gambit and it can make you a quarry, which every so often will help with everything to prove. I think I've
Mm-hmm.
only scored everything to prove this way one time, but like at least it's there as an option. But the +2 move on a gambit is nice. Pushing up to either speed 6 or speed 7 usually gets you where you want to go. And then the other option is actually one that I intended to change out and haven't done yet, but is barging forward. This is a theoretical push 2 on average because you're scattering 5.
Mm-hmm.
In practice, it's never worked out quite that well. It's usually just like a push 1.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and I've never actually gotten to use it with Karsus just because in the games where I've drawn it, he ended up dead too early.
Mm.
But there's the chance of
Because
using it to deal 1 damage because he's a brawler.
yes, yeah.
Um, so that sort of was just like a, hey, this is just an extra thing. I was thinking that like, well, on average it should be push 2, so that should be pretty good. But like it's so just random that you just can't rely on it.
Mm.
Um, so I was thinking either Membranous Wings as another option or a different push card, probably a multi-push card. But I think Membranous Wings probably works best, especially for switching out to um, Winged Death.
Mm.
But that way we have 3 ways to help the charges get better.
Mm-hmm.
Already mentioned Dark Sacrifice is just in there for the extra card draw.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And then another piece to help with charges, just to be more efficient, is Mighty Swing.
Mm.
Um,
Yes.
which anybody who's been on the receiving end of a Sake Mighty Swing
Yeah.
knows why this is scary.
Yeah. It plays nicely with Reckless Swing. It actually works with this upgrade that Frenzy. It's one of their few faction upgrades that you take
Yep.
because if it's part of a charge, every attack in that scything attack is affected by Frenzy.
Yeah, +1
So
dice.
that's
So
nice. Yeah.
pretty solid there. This was actually one I wasn't completely sure I should include. Um, but after sort of building out the rest of the deck, I thought it makes sense. It has a home here. Sake being 3 damage, scything could be
Mm-hmm.
really, really bad. And then
Mm-hmm.
there's also the very rare case where you can use Garrek to do it when he's getting extra glory for kills,
Mm-hmm.
um, which is nice, but not something to rely on. Um, and then the last 2 pieces are some of the weird tech. So
Yeah, I would say these are cool, but also swappable. This is kind of the room to play
yep,
area.
yep. So this
So
is the room to play area. I think given the way people are playing right now, Halls of Hidden
mhm.
Eyes is one that I've found to be extremely powerful.
Mm,
If people stop playing so much with cover, it's not quite as devastating. But
mm,
like, there have been games where I just put it down turn 1, and I'm like, well, I don't know what your game plan is, but if it involves cover, you're not going to be happy because suddenly putting fighters on Smash up to 5/6 chance to succeed on a dice are
yeah,
really painful.
yeah,
Um, and it lasts the whole game. Nobody
yep,
plays waypoints. So this is
right,
also like an auto score for Promise of Destruction almost
yep,
because nobody's ever gotten rid of it in a game that I've played it.
yeah. Be
Um,
interesting to see if we get any more domains that we're interested in down the line here.
yeah. I think if there is another powerful waypoint, this probably becomes a less viable strategy. But as of
Mm,
right now, like it's basically daring people to stand on cover because if they do, my attacks almost always are going to succeed,
hmm
which is crazy to think about because
And if you
usually,
thought that was a crazy card, you
oh
haven't heard
man,
anything yet.
and
So
now the craziest card of them all. This is probably something that most people would look at and be like, Phil, you're dumb. You're drunk. Go home. Don't play this. But I've played it and it's worked out amazingly every single time I've used it.
oh, all
I've
right,
been very happy with it, which is weird. But so this is a card. Burning Wrath.
Mm-hmm.
Most people probably have no idea what this does. This is from the Arena Mortis from Dire Chasm, right?
Yeah, Arena
Yeah.
Mortis 2. Yeah.
Yep. So you choose a friendly fighter. This is a persisting gambit, so it'll last for a while. We'll get to the end condition here. While it's in play, you can re-roll any number of attack dice in this fighter's attack rolls. That's pretty good, right?
Mm-hmm.
Reroll all your dice. What's the
All your
catch?
dice, yeah, straight up good. Especially good if you're getting multiple attacks. So if
Yep.
you're scything,
If
great
you're
with a
Karsus
mighty swing,
or if you're Marty
Karsus.
Swing, yeah,
Yeah,
very very
yeah,
powerful.
yeah. Tell
What's
me
the
more. This sounds like a busted card.
yeah? What's the catch? So at the start of each of your activations, you deal 1 damage to the fighter that this is applied to. This effect will persist until the fighter is taken out of action.
Which will be very, very soon.
It'll be very quickly. Um, so yeah, I'm probably crazy, but the way I've been able to use this has been twofold. One, you either put it on a fighter that uh, you really want to make a guaranteed attack with, so like a Karsus who's got scything and has Berserker Rage on, and then you're
Hmm.
like, okay, YOLO, we are gonna be 3 dice, 3 damage scything, and we reroll all the dice.
Hmm.
That has meant multiple kills multiple times for me.
Hmm.
The other way to use this has been to say, I want to make one attack that's guaranteed to happen, and I need to make sure that Garrek is dead because I have Lost Leader in my hand.
Right.
You charge with
Right.
this on, he's dead. Like, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
So that's been useful. And then
Yeah.
a cute trick that I've pulled off one time is that you use it on the final activation of a round,
Hmm.
and then you take the first activation of the next round, and you get to get 2 charges off with it,
Oh yeah. Sure.
which felt great when I got to do it. I don't think it's going to come up all that much,
Hmm.
but I don't know. I've never missed an attack while it's on because you're
Hmm.
re-rolling all your dice, and when I need to kill a fighter, I can make sure it happens. So it's just
Hmm.
fit the deck for right now. Um, I think there are probably other cards that would be safer to use, but it felt
Hmm.
fun, and I was like, let's try it out. And it's
I mean,
just
there's
where
there's hardly any other deck that you're going to include this in.
oh
So
no,
like
you would
you
never,
gotta give it a rip in the one that it'll take.
you'll
Uh,
never play this anywhere else.
yeah, and some other mini synergies is you can use it to trigger Fueled by Slaughter.
Yep.
So use it to kill off Arnulf at the and so it happened at the start of your activation. React with Fueled by Slaughter, take a chap with Saik, and then go charge with Saik if he hasn't gone yet. Or like
Yep.
you can kill off a little fighter to get 2 high quality attacks essentially in this one activation.
Yeah.
Yeah, the yeah, pretty nuts. And then there's more primacy denial in there.
There
Which
is.
you
I
can do,
mean, yeah, but like at that point, you're kind of just like, yeah,
sure,
this
sure,
card's
sure.
nuts.
Yeah.
You're not doing smart things playing this, but it sometimes it works out.
Hmm.
You can just be crazy enough. Um, and yeah, and then so the upgrades are mostly just standard stat boosts. We're
Yeah.
putting in.
Before we get into this, we talked about some of the gambits that were potential swaps.
Yeah.
Uh, I will say when you first sent this to me, I took a look at it, and then a few hours later, when I woke up on the floor, uh, I I counted up the number of pushes again and came up with one barging forward, and I
Yep.
was like, my God. It is interesting. Those pushes are in there for positioning, and you are kind of leaning on speed boosts to do that for you instead.
Yes.
And a little bit of other stuff. You got an extra range weapon over here. But anyway, carry on. So your upgrades here. We already talked about Frenzy. It's in there. It's +1
Frenzy.
damage
Yep.
on charges. Works with scything. That's great.
Yep. And then the other one that is probably should be cut, but I felt like had enough of a place is Grizzly Trophy.
Hmm.
This is for folks who weren't around at this time. This was of the age of let's give extra glory for kills if you've upgraded a fighter with one of these things.
Hmm.
So both Corn Warbands had one. There was Book of Offerings and Trophy Belt.
Mm-hmm.
and they've since realized that these things are busted if they're universal.
Yeah.
The in-faction ones are fine.
Yeah.
But if you're playing against large warbands, so things like ghouls, gits, and Spellcore Guard, this can cause games to get way out of hand.
Mm.
One or two kills with this on suddenly is an extra 2 or 3 glory,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a really big deal.
Yep.
Um, so it has a place. I don't know that it's always gonna need to be here, but I'd like to have it as sort of that option. Um, and then there's a lot of damage boosts. So Savage Strength, Great Strength, Berserker Rage, which is also an accuracy boost.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's weapons that are effectively just there to be damage boosts for Targor and Arnulf.
Mm-hmm.
The Soul Tooth Dagger, and then the Wicked Lash, which is sort of a weird one.
Yeah. I like both those because Soul Tooth Dagger, it's 3 dice, so it helps with it gets a reroll, which helps with Branching Fate,
Yep.
or digging for those crits or whatever. And Wicked Lash was surprisingly good. And tell me how you ended up with that in there.
Honestly, I landed on this one because I have so many things in the deck that hurt my own fighters.
Exactly.
So I was like, hey, this is a reach to effectively 3 Fury, 2 damage attack. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it will be 4 Fury for 3 damage
Yeah.
because the opponent has already taken some damage.
Yeah.
Um, and the reach 2 ended up being a really big thing to push it over the edge.
Yeah.
But you can pretty much guarantee it's always going to be at least the 3 Fury 2 damage. And since it's 3 Fury 2 damage with reach 2, it's really good.
Yeah.
I've had some crazy plays with this with Fueled by Slaughter,
Mm-hmm.
because standing in the middle of a group of fighters with reach 2 means you have reach on a lot of people.
Yeah.
And if anybody dies, all of a sudden you're just like, and I'll whip somebody else.
Yeah. Yeah.
I really like this one. I think it'll be hard to replace when we hit rotation.
Sure.
But I think it's pretty good. And since it's reach 2, you do get the damage boosts from all of everything except Berserker Rage. Berserker Rage only works on range 1.
Yeah.
Um,
The while we're on the subject of weapons, if you were to try this deck and try to keep Let the Blood Flow in, that's that 3 successful attack or 3 different fighters making a
yeah.
successful attack. I think in that case you probably take a hard look at something like Phantom Fists,
Yes.
so that you can get a quality attack with the stagger to help other people in early. So that's one I'd really consider finding room for if you were a player that wanted to try the Let the Blood Flow.
Yes. And I think that if you really wanted to lean in that direction as well, and if you were going to have illusions, there's also the Chaos Surge for making an attack with an illusion.
Oh, that's right.
Which is a nice one. It was actually one I looked at early, but I was like, you need to run at least 3 illusions to do that.
Yeah.
I wasn't committed to running them, but
Mm-hmm.
is pretty solid. So it is something to consider.
Mm-hmm.
So that's actually most of the upgrades. Most of it's pretty bare bones. Like you're just trying to be deadly.
Yep.
The other pieces that are here, there's Driven by Envy.
Yep. Listen to Nick on that one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's been good.
Yeah.
Plus 1 move by itself is nice because these guys are already pretty fast, so just being a little faster is enough. And being able to go after a leader can sometimes be a big deal, especially if you can load up like Sake with this, so that he's going in early as 3 smash, 3 damage, cleave.
Yeah.
Can be pretty nice.
Yeah.
And then the last 2, so there's Gifted Bulk, just because sometimes you do want to make a fighter last a little bit longer, and it's free. 'Cause at some point you'll get a kill. You just slap this on one of your 3 wound fighters. I think that's usually where I've seen it be useful. Is when I care about Sake or Karsus looking like they're probably going to go down. So I'll just make them 4 wounds so they don't get 1 shot. And then Screaming Demise is the last one. Just
this
because
is react to an attack action, taking your fighter out and throw a charge on somebody.
Yeah,
Yes.
because throwing a charge token on someone can be really tough, and it makes your opponent have to think really hard about whether they can commit to killing the fighter who
Mm,
has this on them.
mm.
Um, this is another one I'm like on the fence about, but it's been psychologically useful. I don't think it's actually come up because nobody's killed them.
Well,
Um,
you never know what decisions you forced, but I think this falls into that same category as in sense that where you're looking at it, you're saying like this doesn't technically play into my main strategy here.
yeah.
Um, it's just a really good card for a warband that expects to have fighters die. Um,
Hmm.
that have terrible defensive profiles. So,
The
uh,
worst.
like why not? Yeah, actually, worst in the game. So why not maybe just include this and get some benefit from that. So, but I think this is one of the ones relatively high on the chopping block if you wanted to, if you thought you didn't have enough damage or didn't have enough accuracy or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And something I've even started looking at was like, okay, how many of these cards would rotate if rotation happened today?
Mm.
And it's a good number of them, and we
Mm-hmm.
definitely would need to find some more damage. So
Sure.
it would probably go, although there's so many things that would be leaving that maybe it would just fill all the other damage slots with
Yeah. Yeah.
with
Yeah.
those. But that's the deck. I've loved it so far. I think it's super fun. It's a great change of pace. I don't think
Can you give
anybody
me
is.
a rough rundown of what you've played against with it?
Yes. So I have played into Soul Raid, Gits, Cunning Crew twice.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Kagra's. It was like we tried to play a best of three, but one of the games went so poorly for Alex that we played another one.
Mm-hmm.
So just 3 games into Alex's Kagra's.
Mm-hmm.
Shadeborn, uh, not Farstriders. What's the Xandar's Truth Seekers?
Yeah.
And that is it. I want to
Okay.
say is a good number. I've played a lot
Sure.
of games with it now. I
Sure. Sure.
what 9,
And
10.
I played him into the Mad Mob. So,
Oh, nice.
um, and that was a Mad Mob build that wanted to brawl. So Garrix
Yeah,
is very happy about that.
yeah,
Uh, Tell me, I'm interested because Shadeborn's out there a lot. It was one of those things where you like, okay, like here's this deck. And actually, before we run down that, am I correct in that your Soul Raid game you were actually wiped out in one, or is that one of the other ones?
Oh
There was some
no,
game where
that was another game.
uh,
I think actually that was the Shadeborn game. Actually, that all my fighters
okay.
died. No, the Soul Raid game. I I had a hot start with Mighty Swing, and all of Skylar's fighters were dead at Action 6.
Oh no! Jeez. I mean, I guess enough speed to get to them before they their profiles bump up, and if you
Well,
can.
he also
Yeah.
came to me.
Oh, all right.
I think so. So basically, what happened is he came to me, which set up a spot where I could go and Mighty Swing 3 people. So he
Mm,
had to
mm,
burn pushes to stop that. Then I
mm.
got to just do it on 2 and killed both of them. And it's like, well,
Oh,
you're
oh
down to
boy.
2 fighters. Like,
Yeah.
this is bad. Um,
Uh,
yeah,
Interesting. I thought the
wasn't.
Shadeborn one would be interesting because you are pinging your own fighters quite a bit, so you're giving them easier inspires.
Yes, they did inspire
Um,
very easily.
but the flip side is that they have, if they've got suffocating mist and was it rippling shadow, rippling
Yeah,
darkness,
yeah.
and often actually I'm seeing a lot of lethal ward from them now. If you don't give two hoots about the feature tokens, those are cards where he's got to figure out how to like push you onto one so that he can trigger one of those, or
Yes.
he or she, whoever's playing them. So I was like, that's kind of interesting. And then with enough speed and aggression, if you can get in there before they get a chance to power up, and all the teleport tricks in the world, if you're right down their gullet right away, it can be challenging. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So what ended up happening was that it was really hard to get started on them for some reason.
Mm,
And I think they actually just played really well because I threw down halls right away, and then
Mm-hmm.
they basically just got off of cover. They just weren't standing on them at all, which felt weird because I was like, they're gonna guaranteed stay on cover because they like need it.
Yeah.
Uh, just abandoned it completely, and then just brawled.
Hmm.
And while they did very well brawling and were killing my fighters, could score more than they could.
Hmm.
So I managed to pick off two of their fighters. They killed my whole warband, and
It sounds like 7 dead
that
fighters.
sounds like seven dead fighters. And so then I was able to just rack up the glory. Um,
Yeah. Nothing more delicious than a win after the fact after being wiped out.
yeah, uh, yeah. It was a weird situation to be like. So yeah, here's my end phase for seven, because all my fighters are dead. But that's actually how this deck kind of blows things out at the end a lot.
Hmm.
Because there's
Yeah.
enough fighters dead that I'm like, well, I know I've got Pure Carnage. I know I've got Corn Cares Not. I'm scoring first, so I can pick up
Hmm.
Lost Leader. Get seven.
Well, that's fun. I think some of my takeaways from having tried this out a little bit, having talked to you multiple times about it, is you know, what we are not saying is that, hey, take this warband, take this build, it's gonna top all the tables. What we are
Probably
saying
not.
is that it can be surprisingly good.
Yep.
People are less used to playing against a sideways strategy, so maybe if try one of those other ones we talked about, to find a magic build or whatever, or even a warband that's not up there so often.
Hmm.
And there's sometimes it's just the fun of like trying out a new puzzle or an old puzzle that we love dearly and talk about
Yeah.
probably enough to make people sick of. Like people are like,
Probably.
we get it. What the heck's you guys like? Reavers,
Yeah.
cool. Find something
We're
else.
we're just some
Uh,
underworld's boomers over here talking about. I remember Shadespire box days. Reavers into the Steelheart. It's all day.
yeah. Uh, but just don't underrate the fun, especially in a situation like this where we've had a little bit of a static. Like we haven't had a new release for a little while. And so
Yeah.
sometimes that's a good way to keep things fresh for yourself. Is try a new warband, try out something really off the wall, and you might happen on something that's surprisingly decent. So
Absolutely. Yeah. I
yeah.
mean, I would definitely say like if this is not enough of a call to experiment, we have some old episodes about doing some mad scientist stuff too. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, especially when stuff feels like it's starting to become set in stone, that's the time to go experiment because you can
Mm-hmm.
find the thing that is like just on a different enough vector that people A won't be expecting it and B won't probably have tools in their toolbox for it. And they'll
Mm-hmm.
just be like, oh no, what do I do now? uh,
Yeah.
so yeah, if folks out there have their own weird off the wall builds they've been trying, send them our way. I would love to
Yeah.
hear
Totally.
more about them.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, I think that's gonna do it for us today.
Yeah.
When in doubt, try something out. That's fun. We have our usuals here. You can talk to us. We're on Twitter at WTHcast or email whatthehexcast@gmail.com. If you lose track of finding any events or podcasts or anything, there's themortalrealms.com. Pretty easy to navigate that. We also thank that network for having us on there, letting us be part of that cool crew. It runs a Discord where always got more people filtering in. I'm surprised.
Yeah.
It's one of these things where I've been playing these games long enough that you feel like I just kind of know about what's out there. The number of times somebody like drops into that Discord and says, "Yeah, I just heard about this," or like I just heard about what the heck, or I just heard about Dogs of War Cry. I was like, "Oh, well, cool."
Yeah.
I I uh, I forget that like there's people coming and going in the hobby or returning all the time, anything
Yeah,
like that.
for sure.
So, coming up next, we're begging you, show us show us some light at the end of the nether maze. Give us the hexbane we were promised. Um if we're hoping to that we get a chance to talk about them um, in the event that they drop before our next episode is due, which should be 2 weeks from this release. We will see what we can do to hustle out a faster release.
Mm-hmm.
We do try to maintain our once every 2 week schedule, but we'll let you know if that doesn't happen. We have some more things on the various burners. There's the background of every warband sort of thing. We may do some live deck builds with some, get another one of these ideas. If you have another outside the lines deck, you want to chat about it, drop me a line. We've had a lot of guests, and if you got something interesting, we'd be happy to work it over with you.
Yeah.
But Phil, I got a question for you.
Sure.
Yeah. Hey, did you actually? This was news to me. When they reprint a card, I always, because they reprinted it Hold Objective 1, so many times. As far as I could tell, the first few times I checked, they kept the flavor text the same on that. Do you know that they do not always keep the flavor text the same on these reprints?
Oh, really? I had no
Yeah.
idea.
Well, I'm going to ask you a card that has been reprinted. I'm going to read you both of the quotes that have ever been printed on this card.
All right.
And you're going to see if you can tell me what it is. So, butchered bodies litter the shadow-shrouded streets of the mirrored city. Or, blood, blood, blood for corn, Karsus the Chained.
Yeah, well, that one's pure carnage, I think.
Yeah, there you go.
That's interesting, though. I had no idea that they would have changed it. I mean, I guess that makes sense because he's on that card now, and he wasn't there before. Who was on it before?
You used to have the Iron Skulls boys, Gerzag.
Yeah.
One of, I think it might actually be a Bone Cutter looking at it, but it's a little hard to tell. So,
there's a warband I haven't played in a while.
Yep. It was a thing where I looked at that card and I was like, oh, that's funny. I don't remember Karsus being quoted on this thing. Isn't it? I don't remember being on the original art. I remember being kind of tickled that he was on the reprint. Wouldn't it be funny if he was just always quoted and he just finally fought his way to the front of the screenshot to get in there? And so then I went looking. I was like, oh, you know what? He wasn't. They overhauled it altogether.
Funny.
So
that's funny.
That might be a bigger research project. Figure out how many have changed.
Oh yeah.
That's it. So your recommended listening for this episode is from the Kill 'Em All album by Metallica, theme there, and then a little shout out to your Wicked Lash. I picked the track Whiplash for it. So if you haven't watched Stranger Things and gotten into Metallica, there's another push for you.
Sure.
So, that'll do it for What the Hex. I've been Davy.
And this is Phil.
She's I don't know. I don't even know if I want to edit it in. Whisper. Man, I'm just talking all over myself. But the